warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new edition of Africa Today, our program that brings you all the latest news and events happening inside the Black Continent. Now, we'll start straight away with a look at some of the news making the headlines, and we move to the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who on Monday approved the creation of a Russian naval facility in Sudan capable of mooring nuclear-powered surface vessels, clearing the way for Moscow's first substantial military presence in Africa. We have more details in the story.
Russia announced that it will build a naval base on Sunday's Red Sea coast, its first in Africa. Russia said on Monday it will proceed with plans to construct a base for 300 personnel and space for up to 4 warships, including nuclear-powered vessels. The base would be only Russia's second naval facility outside the territory of former Soviet Union after Tartus in Syria. The announcement comes just after a year after Russia hosted its first geopolitical summit focused on relations with African states, to which it has ramped up sales of arms and investments in natural resources projects in recent years. Russia has been building stronger links with African states in recent years as it seeks new bilateral relationships and trade deals to bolster its global geopolitical influence. The facility will give Russia's large naval a staging post in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden region, through which a large amount of shipping trade sails between Europe and Asia.
And moving on, Libya's rival sides on Monday wrapped up a week of UN-brokered talks without agreeing on a transitional government that would lead to the country to an election in December of next year. The political forum was the latest effort to end the chaos in the North African country. We have more details in the story.
Acting head of the United Nations Support Mission in Libya, Stephanie Williams, announced the conclusion of the Libyan talks in Tunisia without forming a unified government. In a press conference, Stephanie said that the talks will resume next week by video conference to agree on mechanisms and criteria for selecting the figures who will assume power in the future. She added that the participants in the Libyan Dialogue Conference in Tunisia agreed to hold an online meeting a week later to discuss the implementation mechanisms of the agreements they reached. At the end of the conference, Williams noticed the complete agreement between the parties to organize the elections in December 2021, and she said that the participants agreed on the need of exchange in Libya and the importance of implementing a plan to reform public institutions. The Libyan political dialogue has concluded on Monday in Tunisia after a week of direct discussions that ended in an agreement to organize elections in December 2021. And according to the United Nations, Williams confirmed that she is extremely satisfied with the outcomes of these negotiations, especially concerning agreements on the roadmap and the powers of the executive authorities. The forum near the Tunisian capital included 75 representatives from all parties, chosen by the United Nations according to their geographical, political, or ideological affiliation, but excluding the main parties. The United Nations announced on November 13th that the delegates in Tunisia have agreed to hold national elections on December 24th, 2021, without specifying whether it will be presidential, parliamentary, or general elections. These discussions followed the ceasefire that was officially announced in October.
Continuing with more news, the Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry made contacts with the Algerian and Moroccan parties respectively, discussing the latest developments that occurred in the West Saharan border zone, urging restraint in a bid to help reinstate a 29-year-old ceasefire agreement. We have more details in the story and we'll be right back for a further in-depth discussion with our guest. Do stay tuned.
Egypt has called all parties involved in tensions over the Western Saharan border zone of Guerguerat to exercise self-restraint and adhere to related United Nations Security Council resolutions. Fear of resurgence of the decades-long conflict between Morocco and the Polisario Front have risen recently due to reported confrontations between both sides over the crossing area of Guerguerat, which the Polisario group blocked last month. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ahmed Hafez said in a statement that Egypt urged all concerned parties to adhere to this ceasefire and refrain from committing any provocation acts that might inflict harm on economic interest and trade exchange in the area. Egypt stressed the necessity of resuming the political process to solve the crisis in a way that achieves stability and maintains all parties' interests as well as respect the state's sovereignty. The Polisario Front, a Western Sahara independence movement hosted by Algeria, declared on Friday the end of a 3-decade ceasefire agreement with Morocco following what it called the border confrontation. Morocco's army on Friday announced the opening of a blocked road in a buffer zone in southern part of the territory, stressing that the army had only fired warning shots and was committed to the ceasefire.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by Dr. Raouf Ghaffar, our political analyst. It's a very good afternoon to you, Doctor.
My dear.
Thank you very much for joining us, sir. Now, the leader of the Polisario Front announced in Western Sahara announced an end to the 29-year-old ceasefire with Morocco over border operations. Could you tell us a bit more about who these Polisario Front are and their ethnicity, and by what power they have to announce the end of the ceasefire?
Well, I mean, when Spain left this area about 40 years ago, or maybe 45, in the 70s anyway, this particular area, which is mainly desert, was left, I mean, between Mauritania and Morocco. And then by the end of the 70s, Mauritania evacuated from there. So they left it as a, if I may use the term, a no man's land. And Morocco, ever since, claimed its sovereignty over this piece of the desert, and then came up a group of students, etc., Muslims, of course, and they claimed that they are asking for the liberation of this area from the Moroccan so-called occupation, and forming the Sahara Republic, Democratic Republic. So I mean, not recognized by anybody. They are simply trying to form a country. They have been backed by the Algerians ever since, under the pretext of helping them to get their independence and etc. Anyway, briefly, there was always a coming and going conflict between Morocco and this front, and they reached maybe in the beginning of the 90s,
yes,
last century, a sort of truce and ceasefire, and there was always a buffer zone between the Moroccan borders and the so-called Sahara Republic. There was always a United Nations presence, etc., etc. So in maybe in a couple of months, this issue was raised in the United Nations,
yes,
and the new envoy of the United Nations to this area was not named, and this got the Polisario Front. They are led, by the way, by a gentleman called Brahim Ghali.
Ghali, yes.
And again, the Algerian rulers, they were very frustrated from not appointing a UN envoy. And, you know, I mean, the turmoil started, and finally, Mr. Ghali announced that he is now he is not committed anymore to this ceasefire, and he will answer to any Moroccan aggressions or military movement in this area, while Morocco claims that they are simply consolidating the ceasefire in the buffer zone. So it's a rather complicated situation that has been going on for almost 40 years without solution. So we hope that, I don't know, maybe this last move might either ignite new hostilities, or hopefully maybe will alert the international community to find an end to this really blurred.
Right. Dr. Raouf, now this announcement by the gentleman that you mentioned, Ibrahim Ghali, he's the Polisario leader. What were the terms of the ceasefire in this Western Saharan region, and why did he make this announcement? What is the reason behind such an announcement, especially for this decades-long conflict now to re-emerge?
As I told you, this area was always claimed by the Moroccan, and front was formed, encouraged by Algerians at the beginning, and they still, by the way, back them all the way until today. They tried to announce the formation and their independence and the formation of the new Democratic Republic of the Sahrawi, called the Sahrawi Democratic Republic. As I said, not recognized even by Morocco, but again, under international pressure, they agreed to stop hostilities and sort of keep the situation as a status quo situation. And even the UN has recognized this area as a non-self-governing territory, which actually doesn't mean anything. So anyway, so this has been going, as I said, for about 30 years now. This ceasefire, people are, well, keeping the status quo situation, hoping that the UN will one day find a solution. So this time, and mind you, the Moroccan military is always having sort of maneuvers and actions in this particular area.
Which is ironic because, as you said, the Moroccan side conducts military operations over there, claiming that this was aimed at somehow consolidating the ceasefire. How do you see this claim?
Yes, I mean, this front is a liberation front, and they are not very sort of complying with the UN situation, particularly lately when the UN did not name a new envoy to this area. So they are always, there is going and coming and to and fro between the two, between the Polisario from one side and Morocco from the other. There has not been a real war, if we can say that, but it's always a sort of fight, small fights here and there. So this has been repeated. This time, they said we are not, as I earlier said, we are not complying to the ceasefire, and I think that all this, as I said, aimed to inciting the UN and the world community to finally find a solution to this continued problem. Yes.
Right. Dr. Algeria, on the other hand, is the main backer of the Polisario Front. How important is Algeria in this conflict and detrimental in whether the conflict could further escalate, in your opinion?
And honestly, I never understood why, but anyway, Algeria, having fought for independence, in my humble opinion, mind you, fought for their independence for long years and suffered a lot to get to their independence. They feel sort of committed to any body in the area asking and looking for their independence. So they have been, the Polisario, when it was initially formed, I think they recurred to Algeria for backing, and at the time Algeria gave them all the backing they need under the pretext that they were looking for independence and forming a new state, etc., etc. This has been going on, and mind you, I think that Algeria is sort of, again, in my opinion, dominating this territory, and they are imposing whatever they want on the leaders of this area. So they don't want to let go. And again, if you're asking me for my opinion, I don't think it will escalate that much to reach the level of really dangerous military conflict. But I'm sure that maybe in the coming few days and weeks we shall see a movement by the international community, by the UN, to try and settle things down and maybe keep them
Especially,
as they were for the last 40 years. And
yes, especially, Doctor, since a referendum on the status of this Western Saharan area was supposed to be conducted since 1975. I mean, we're speaking...
I mean, they have called for a referendum, was never done, and I don't think that a new one will take place. So,
even with the further escalation, you don't think this referendum will take place even after this new escalation?
I don't seriously think so. I mean, if the world community does not, the UN, I mean, does not put its foot down to try and find a final solution, the situation will remain very fluid in this area. So I don't see why this time the referendum will take place. I hope it will, but I don't think. This is my opinion.
And with the announcement of the end of this decades-long ceasefire, do you think further escalation of violence in the area could occur? Well,
escalation in the real sense of the word, I don't think. There will be some operations going and coming, but not really up to the level of military conflict. There will be some operations here and there, but not I said, not up to the level of conflict. And I'm sure that the United Nations will, one way or the other, calm them down and keep the situation as it is, in my opinion.
Indeed. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Dr. Raouf Ghafer, our political analyst and our guest for this afternoon. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us and for all your insight. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up today's edition of Africa Today. My name is Angie Mehermini. Thanks for watching.